The morning air along San Francisco's pier carried the faint scent of salt and machine oil, a mix that Ava Morgan had grown to love. She'd been at Vega Auto Repairs since just after sunrise. Hands already smudged with grease, the hum of an old radio in the corner, spilling classic soul tracks into the cool garage. She was wiping down a set of tools when she noticed the car. It was impossible to miss. Cherry red, low-slung and gleaming like liquid fire under the pale light, the Ferrari prototype looked wildly out of place against the cracked asphalt and faded paint of the neighboring warehouses. Its curves were aggressive, yet graceful, a predator lounging before the hunt. The gull-wing door on the driver's side was open, and the front hood had been popped, revealing the tightly packed mechanical heart of the machine. Ava's brow furrowed. She didn't need to be close to see the faint shimmer of heat from the engine bay, a little too much heat for a car that had clearly just arrived. That wasn't right. Something in her instincts, honed from a decade of working on high-performance engines, tugged at her. She stepped closer, cautious but curious, the sound of her boots scraping lightly on the concrete. Leaning over the open hood, she inhaled and caught the faint scent of coolant, sharper than it should have been. Her fingers brushed the edge of a hose clamp. The voice was sharp, slicing through the quiet morning like broken glass. Ava straightened, blinking against the sudden shadow that fell across her. A tall man in a tailored navy suit stood there, his perfectly knotted tie swaying slightly in the breeze. Behind him, two men in black security jackets moved in, stepped their postures rigid. The man's eyes pale cold and unblinking locked on hers. "What the hell do you think you're doing to my car?" Ava opened her mouth, the explanation ready. "I was just what? Tampering with a multi-million-dollar prototype. Do you have any idea?" He stepped forward, the leather of his shoes whispering against the pavement. "Get away from it. Now." She held his gaze, her voice calm despite the heat rising in her chest. "Your coolant line is loose. If you take this thing out the way it is, you could blow your engine before you hit the bridge." For a beat, there was silence. The wind tugged lightly at the cuff of his suit. Then he laughed a short, dismissive bark. "You expect me to believe that? From you?" His gaze flicked over her faded work shirt, the rolled sleeves, the streak of grease along her forearm. "You think you know more about this machine than the engineers who built it?" Ava let her hand fall away from the hood. "Believe what you want. I'm just telling you what I see." He shook his head, the faintest curl of a smirk at the edge of his mouth. "Security," he said, without looking away from her. "Make sure she doesn't come within 50 feet of this car again." The two guards stepped forward. Ava didn't move, just picked up the rag she'd set on the fender, folded it slowly, and slid it into her back pocket. "You're welcome," she said quietly, stepping past him and the wall of security. He didn't respond, but she caught the way his jaw tightened, like he wasn't used to people walking away from him without permission. As she reached the edge of the lot, she glanced back once. The man was already sliding into the driver's seat, his posture crisp, one hand adjusting his cuff as if brushing off the moment entirely. The Ferrari's engine roared to life, smooth and deep. But Ava couldn't shake the thought it wouldn't sound that way for long. By the time Ava walked back into Vega Auto Repairs, the radio had switched from soul to early morning talk. Luis was crouched near the rear of a dented pickup truck, a welding mask perched on top of his messy dark hair. "Where have you been?" he called without looking up, the sharp crack of his welding torch punctuating the question. Ava tossed her rag onto the workbench. "Out front." "Ferrari prototype." Luis froze the arc of light from his torch, flickering out. "Wait, a Ferrari?" Here, he straightened, flipping the mask up to reveal eyes wide with disbelief. "You're telling me a $250,000 Italian supercar was just parked?" "More like $3 million, Ava said, reaching for a wrench. "And it's not exactly stock. Concept model. Looks like something they'd show off at the Auto Expo." Luis gave a low whistle. "What's it doing in this neighborhood?" She shrugged. "CEO probably taking a scenic detour. Or showing off." Luis eyed her as she slid under the raised hood of an old Civic. "And you didn't go anywhere near it, right?" Ava's silence was answer enough. "Oh no, you didn't." Luis set his gloves down. "You've been here, 9 months? And you're about to get arrested for touching a billionaire's toy?" Ava snorted softly. "I wasn't touching it. I was inspecting it. There's a difference." Inspecting it, Luis repeated, shaking his head. You realize guys like that, rich white suit-wearing guys, they see someone like you near their car, and they already think the worst. She didn't answer right away, tightening a bolt until it squeaked. Doesn't matter. If I see something that could cause an accident, I'm gonna say something. That's how I was raised. Luis's expression softened. You mean back at, yeah, she cut in gently, back at Harris Automotive. The name carried weight. Harris Automotive had been one of the top restoration shops in California, known for handling rare classics and luxury imports. Ava had worked there for 5 years until a promotion she'd been promised went to a man with less experience and far fewer certifications. She'd walked out that same day. Anyway, she said, straightening up. Doesn't matter. It's not my problem now. Luis opened his mouth to respond, but was interrupted by the sound of sirens, not police, but the kind used for crowd control. The noise drifted in from the pier. They must be setting up for that launch thing, he said. Big press event for Harrington Motors. New electric supercar. Ava froze. Harrington. The name rang like a bell. She didn't have to guess, she knew that was the man from earlier. Nate Harrington, CEO of one of the biggest automotive empires in the country. Her gut twisted, not from fear, but from the memory of his voice, sharp, clipped, dripping with the kind of condescension that stuck to your skin. Luis had already moved to the front of the garage, peering down the street. Look at this circus. Press van security everywhere. And yep, there's your Ferrari guy. Ava stepped beside him, watching the flurry of movement near the end of the pier. The red concept car gleamed under the growing sunlight, drawing the eyes of every photographer in the crowd. Harrington himself stood beside it, shaking hands with some investor in a charcoal suit. Looks like he's got bigger things to worry about than you, Luis said. Maybe, Ava murmured, but her eyes stayed on the car. She knew engines well enough to know that whatever was going wrong under that hood wasn't going to fix itself. And if she was right, he'd find out the hard way. The pier was buzzing. By mid-morning, the Harrington Motors launch had transformed the waterfront into a stage of glass steel and money. Cameras flashed, journalists jostled for position, and a sleek black stage rose just beyond the red carpet. The cherry-red Ferrari concept sat at the center, polished to an almost unreal shine. Under the spotlights, it looked like the very idea of speed given form. Nate Harrington was in his element. He wore confidence the way other men wore armor, precise, impenetrable. Every handshake was deliberate, every smile rehearsed to perfection. Beside him, the head of engineering murmured last-minute updates into his ear. The launch would start in 10 minutes. The plan was simple roll, or the Ferrari forward in front of the cameras open with a brief speech about the future of sustainable performance. Then take it for a short demonstration run along the pier. Smooth. Controlled. Perfect. Except when Nate slid into the driver's seat and pressed the ignition, the dashboard lit up in angry red. He frowned, tapped the button again. The starter whined a hollow, struggling sound, but the engine didn't catch. He tried a third time. Nothing. The head of engineering's smile faltered. That's odd. No kidding. Nate said, his voice low but sharp. Fix it. The man nodded quickly, signaling for 2 techs in matching polos. They popped to the hood. Began a rapid-fire exchange in automotive jargon, their movements clipped with urgency. Cameras were already shifting toward them, lenses sniffing the scent of a story. What's going on? Nate demanded. The older tech hesitated. We can't pinpoint it yet, sir. Could be a thermal sensor. Could be fuel delivery. It's how long Nate cut in. A beat of silence. Best case, an hour. Nate's jaw clenched. An hour. We go live in 8 minutes. The PR director approached all fake calm and tight-lipped panic. Nate, maybe we can pivot the presentation. Use the backup model. No, Nate snapped. This is the launch. This car. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a flicker of movement near the barricades. A woman stood there, work shirt, rolled sleeves, grease smudge on her arm. She was watching the scene with a look that wasn't curiosity so much as certainty. Ava Morgan. Nate's expression hardened. Security, keep her out of here. Before the guard could move, another voice cut in. I know her, a woman said, stepping down from the stage. She was tall, with chestnut hair swept into a low knot, her dress a pale blue that stood out against the steel and carbon fiber around her. Elaine Harrington, Nate's younger sister. She's a mechanic, Elaine continued. And unless you want to spend the next hour watching your press coverage go up in flames, I suggest you let her look at it. Nate turned toward her, disbelief etched into every line of his face. You can't be serious. We have an entire engineering team which hasn't fixed it, Elaine said evenly. She turned to Ava. You worked on performance engines, didn't you? Ava kept her voice neutral. I did. I'm not letting some random street mechanic touch $1 million prototype, Nate said, his tone like ice. Elaine's eyes narrowed. Then I guess you'll be explaining to the shareholders why your big reveal is an empty stage. She gestured toward the crowd, where the murmur of speculation was already growing. Nate looked from his sister to Ava, to the car, to the cluster of journalists now angling their microphones toward the commotion. He felt the heat of the spotlight shift not from admiration, but from anticipation. 15 minutes, Ava said, suddenly breaking the tension. That's all I need. And I'll do it in plain sight so you can watch my every move. It wasn't a plea. It was a challenge. Nate studied her, searching for any flicker of uncertainty. But all he found was that steady, unblinking gaze, the same one from earlier that morning. Finally, he exhaled through his nose. Fine, 15 minutes. And if you scratch it, you're paying for the paint job. Ava's lips twitched, not quite a smile. Deal. The crowd had shifted into a restless hum, like a tide pulling back before the wave. Every camera lens on the pier pointed toward the Ferrari, the woman in the grease-stained shirt, and the CEO who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. Ava walked toward the car without hesitation, the hot boards of the pier creaking beneath her boots. The Harrington Motors tech stepped aside reluctantly, exchanging skeptical glances. She didn't acknowledge them. Her eyes were already scanning the layout under the open hood. Nate stood on the other side, arms folded. You're wasting time. Then I better get to it, she said flatly. From the tool trolley, she picked out a slim ratchet, a temperature probe, and a flashlight. Her movements were quick, precise, no hesitation, no wasted motion. She crouched, pressing the probe against the intake manifold, then leaned in to listen. To anyone else, it was just mechanical hum. To Ava, it was a story. She traced the line from the intercooler to the fuel rail fingers moving lightly along the clamps until they reached one fitting that was just loose enough to feel wrong. Her thumb pressed it, and the metal gave a fraction of a millimeter. Bingo. You have a thermal sensor tripping false readings, she said over her shoulder. Your ECU thinks the block is overheating, so it's cutting fuel delivery. One of the Harrington techs frowned. That doesn't make sense. We ran diagnostics. You ran them cold. Ava interrupted without looking up. Problem's intermittent. Happens when the engine's under load. She reached for a small torque wrench and tightened the clamp with a sharp metallic click. Then she unplugged the sensor connector, wiped it clean with a rag from her back pocket, and reattached it. That should buy you time, she said, standing and wiping her hands. But you'll want to replace that sensor before it strands you. The whole thing had taken less than 6 minutes. Nate stepped closer to the car, peering under the hood, like he might find a reason to call her bluff. And you're sure that's it? Ava's eyes met his. Start it. For a moment he didn't move. Then, with a curt motion, he slid into the driver's seat. His thumb pressed the ignition. The Ferrari roared to life instantly, its engine note clean and deep. No trace of the strained whine from earlier. The sound rolled across the pier, pulling heads toward the stage and silencing the low murmur of the crowd. Nate's eyes flicked to the dashboard. All green. The tech beside him blinked. It's stable. Temps are normal. Nate looked up at Ava through the open gull-wing door. There was no smugness on her face, no visible triumph, just calm like she'd known this would happen. Elaine, standing nearby, let out a breath she'd been holding. She turned to the PR director, whose phone was halfway out of his pocket. Get the photographers back in place. We're on. The team scrambled the launch sequence, snapping back into motion. But Nate didn't move from the driver's seat right away. He studied Ava for a beat longer, as if trying to decide what to make of her. Not bad. For 15 minutes, he said finally, the corner of his mouth twitching almost toward a smile. Ava just nodded, stepping back from the car. You're welcome. She turned and began walking toward the barricades. The crowd parted instinctively around her, the cameras swiveling to follow her exit, even as Nate revved the Ferrari for the demo run. Elaine caught up with her halfway down the pier. "You know," she said, falling into step beside Ava, "he's not as bad as he looks." Ava gave her a sidelong glance. "Could have fooled me." Elaine laughed softly. "Trust me, for him, that was practically an apology." "Guess I'll frame it," Ava said dryly, and kept walking. Behind them, the Ferrari surged forward down the length of the pier, the crowd cheering as the red blur roared past. Nate Harrington might have been the man in the driver's seat. But Ava knew, and so did Elaine, that the only reason the launch hadn't gone up in smoke was because of a woman in a grease-stained shirt. By late afternoon, the pier was nearly empty. The cameras were gone, the banners were being pulled down, and the echo of the Ferrari's engine had faded into memory. The press would call the launch a success leak, controlled a showcase of engineering brilliance. But Nate Harrington knew better. He knew there'd been a moment, a fragile, dangerous moment, when the entire thing could have collapsed in front of the world. And the person who had saved him wasn't on his payroll. He found himself pacing outside Vega Auto Repairs, the warm glow of the setting sun reflecting off the glass. It wasn't the sort of place he'd normally step into grease-stained concrete floors, the faint tang of oil in the air. But he'd learned that morning that some things couldn't be measured by marble lobbies and boardroom tables. Through the open garage door, he saw her. Ava was leaning over the open hood of an old Chevy, her hands moving with the same quiet precision he'd seen earlier. Luis was in the back, sweeping a faint tune, whistling through his teeth. Nate stepped inside. Ava didn't look up. "We're closed. I'm not here for service," Nate said. His voice carried that same clipped precision. But there was something under it now, not quite humility, but close. Luis looked between them, clearly recognizing the man from the pier. "I'll go check inventory," he muttered, disappearing into the back. Nate waited until they were alone. "You were right." Ava straightened slowly, wiping her hands on a rag. "About the sensor, about a lot of things," he said. "Including me." She tilted her head. "That's a first." He almost smiled, then caught himself. "I owe you a thank you. You saved the launch. Probably saved me a few million in damage control." "I didn't do it for you," she said plainly. "I did it because that car was going to fail and I couldn't watch it happen." "That's admirable," Nate said. "But you could have walked away. Most people would have." Ava's gaze was steady. "I'm not most people." The words hung between them. Nate had spent years surrounded by people who told him what he wanted to hear, people who calculated every word for advantage. Ava didn't play that game. She didn't seem to care who he was or what he thought of her. "Look," he said finally, "I don't do this often, but I'm offering you a job. Head technician on a project we're running. It's experimental high-performance electric builds. You'd have resources you can't even imagine here." Ava blinked once slowly. "So this is about you needing me." "It's about me recognizing talent," Nate said. "You've got it. And I'd rather have you working with me than somewhere else." She let the rag fall onto the workbench. "I've worked for people like you before. It didn't end well." "I'm not them," he said. Her eyes searched his face, looking for the cracks in the armor. "No," she said finally. "But you could be." Nate exhaled. "Then give me a chance to prove I'm not." For the first time that day, Ava's expression softened just a fraction. "I'll think about it." He nodded once, like that was more than he expected. "Fair enough." As he turned to leave, Luis reappeared, watching the exchange with a raised brow. When Nate was gone, he looked at Ava. "You're actually thinking about it." She picked up the wrench again, focusing back on the Chevy. "I'm thinking, sometimes the best place to change a system is from the inside." Luis grinned. "And sometimes," he said, "it's just fun to make a billionaire sweat." Ava smirked faintly, but didn't answer. The headquarters of Harrington Motors was a glass and steel fortress in the heart of San Francisco's financial district. From the street, it looked untouchable. 40 stories of power polished to a mirror finish. Inside, it smelled faintly of leather coffee and ambition. Ava stood in the lobby, feeling the shift in energy the moment she stepped past the revolving doors. People moved quickly here, eyes fixed on phones or tablets, conversations clipped and efficient. No one lingered. No one wasted time. She didn't look like she belonged, at least not by their standards. Her dark jeans were clean, but plain, her work boots scuffed. The Harrington Motors polo Elaine had sent over barely softened the edges of her working-class roots. Luis had teased her that morning. "You're going into the lion's den," he'd said. She'd just smirked. "I've dealt with worse." The elevator ride to the 27th floor was silent, except for the faint hum of machinery. When the doors opened, she stepped into a boardroom that looked like a set from a corporate drama, long mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling windows, spilling light across a skyline worth millions. Nate Harrington was already there, flanked by a half-dozen board members in tailored suits. Elaine sat near the far end, her presence a calm counterweight to the sharp edges around her. "You're late," Nate said. But his tone lacked the bite it had the first time they met. "Traffic," Ava replied evenly, taking a seat halfway down the table. She didn't fidget, didn't shrink under their collective gaze. One of the board members, a silver-haired man with an expensive watch, leaned forward. "So this is the mechanic from the pier." Ava turned her head toward him. "That's me. Ava Morgan. And we're supposed to believe another said, a woman with a crisp British accent, that you can contribute to a project involving some of the most advanced electric drive systems in the world. I don't need you to believe it," Ava said. "I just need to show you." Elaine's lips twitched into a barely-there smile. Nate gestured toward the wall, where a set of glass panels slid open to reveal a prototype draped in black fabric. "This," he said, "is the HMX-1. Our first fully electric hypercar. Top speed over 220 miles an hour. 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds. And right now, it's not ready for production." Ava walked toward it without being told. She didn't hesitate to lift the cover, revealing a machine that looked like it had been pulled from the future, low predatory, every line honed for speed. She popped the hood. The room went still. "You're going to let her?" the silver-haired man began. "She has 15 minutes, Nate interrupted. His eyes were locked on Ava. It didn't take that long. 10 minutes in, she was pointing out a minor misalignment in the thermal management system, the kind of flaw that wouldn't show up until the car had been pushed hard enough to overheat. Left unchecked, it could ruin a demonstration in front of investors. "How did you?" the British woman started. Ava straightened. "Same way I caught your sensor issue on the pier. I know engines. Doesn't matter if they're burning gas or running on a lithium pack. Machines talk if you know how to listen." The boardroom was quiet for a moment. Then Nate spoke. "She's on the team." There was a murmur of dissent, but Nate's tone cut through it. "You all saw what she just did. You saw what she did at the launch. If you want this car to be more than a press release, we need her." Elaine leaned back, satisfaction flickering in her eyes. The vote wasn't unanimous, but it passed. When the meeting ended, Nate caught up with Ava by the elevator. "You handled yourself well," he said. She shrugged. "I wasn't there to impress them. I was there to fix the problem." "Exactly," Nate said. "That's why you're here." The elevator doors opened. Ava stepped inside but turned back before they closed. "Don't expect me to pull punches just because you're the boss," she said. His smile was small but real. "I wouldn't have it any other way." 1 month later, San Francisco wore its best winter light, clear, cold, and full of hard edges softened by gold. Harrington Motors had reassembled the circus at the pier, but this time there was no panic drifting under the tent. The banners were tighter. The mics worked on the first test. The HMX-1 sat on a low platform like a secret finally ready to be told. Backstage, Ava tugged on a pair of thin mechanic's gloves, more out of habit than necessity. She'd swapped the shop boots for clean work sneakers and the polo for a black Harrington jacket with her name embroidered over the heart. The letters still surprised her sometimes. They felt earned. Luis appeared at her elbow, a grin breaking through the nerves. "Can you believe this? Me front row at a hypercar launch, and I didn't even have to sneak in." "You brought your own snacks again, didn't you?" He patted his jacket pocket, scandalized, as if I would okay, yes. He sobered, his voice dropping. "I'm proud of you, Ava." She bumped her shoulder against his. "You kept the lights on when I needed a place to land. I'm not here without you." Out on the platform, Elaine ran point like a seasoned conductor directing crew with 2 fingers and a look, then sliding to the press line for a quick, bright quote. When she spotted Ava, she flashed a small private thumbs up. It worked better than any pep talk. The music faded. The crowd settled. Nate Harrington stepped into the light. He didn't look different at first glance. Same sharp suit, same controlled posture. But the edges weren't weapons today. They were tools. He took the mic with the ease of a man who'd practiced, then set the script aside with the ease of one who didn't need it anymore. "Good morning," he said. "Last month I stood on this pier and told you a story about the future of performance. What I didn't tell you was that 5 minutes before we started, that future almost stalled. A ripple of laughter. A dozen cameras found his face. He didn't blink. We like to pretend success is inevitable if you have enough money or enough ambition or enough polish. That's not true. Sometimes success hinges on whether someone in a grease-stained shirt is willing to step through a crowd, ignore the noise, and fix the thing that's actually broken." He turned palm open toward the wings. Ava Morgan. For a breath, the pier went quiet the way places do when they know they're seeing the right thing. Then the applause started, curious at first, then warm. Luis whooped without shame. Elaine's smile creased into something proud enough to hurt. Ava stepped into the light. The jacket felt heavier now, but in a good way, like responsibility can feel when you choose it. She stopped beside Nate, not behind him. He didn't move to center himself. He stayed exactly where he was. "This is the lead systems engineer for the HMX-1 thermal program," he continued, and if the title surprised her, he didn't show it. "If you want to know why this car works, start with her." Ava leaned toward the mic. "Engines are honest," she said, voice steady. "Even when they're batteries and motors and code. They tell you what they need if you listen long enough without assuming you already know." She glanced at the car, its carbon fiber skin catching sun like water. "We listened. It wasn't a speech so much as a clean join, no extra welds, no weak seams." She stepped back. The demo began. The HMX-1 didn't so much launch as decide the world would move around it. Silent then, singing, it streaked the length of the pier and arrowed back brakes, biting invisible air. Numbers popped on the big screen. Temp, steady draw, optimal margins, happy. The engineers in the control booth didn't high-five. They exhaled the month they'd been holding. When the run ended and the applause rose again, a reporter shouted over the rails, "Harrington, what changed?" Last launch felt tense. "Today feels different," Nate considered. "We stopped treating excellence like a private club," he said, "and we stopped underestimating quiet talent." He looked to Ava, then straight into the cameras. "We also started listening when the right person said we were wrong." It landed, not as spin, as confession. After the stage cleared, after the photos and the handshakes and the whispered investor promises, the four of them found a slice of shade behind a lighting rig. Nate, Elaine, Ava, and Luis, who handled VIP laminate badges as if they might detonate. Elaine nudged Ava with an envelope. "2 things," she said. "First, board approval for the apprenticeship program you proposed. 12 paid spots this year for women and underrepresented techs. You pick the candidates. You set the curriculum." Ava didn't smile often out of reflex. She did now, quick and fierce. "We'll need more than 12 next year." "Already planning on it," Elaine said. "And the second thing?" Luis asked, peering like a kid at a cake box. Elaine tipped her head toward Nate. He cleared his throat, uncharacteristically unsure. "We put your name on the thermal suite. Morgan Lab." It felt accurate. Luis slapped his own knee. "The Morgan Lab. Ava, you gonna act brand new now? You gonna start charging me for wiper blades?" Ava shook her head, eyes bright. She didn't try to hide. "You're already paying in snacks." Nate shifted more serious again. "I got a lot wrong," he said to Ava, low enough to keep it theirs. "I'm going to get things wrong again. But I won't mistake the right voice for noise. Not ever again." She studied him for a beat that would have felt longer a month ago. The arrogance was still there. Confidence rarely dies. But it had been re-geared. The power wasn't a wall anymore. It was a door. "Good," she said. "Because the car's perfect today. Tomorrow it'll tell us something new. That's how this works." He nodded once like a man signing a contract that mattered. The sun slid a degree west. Crew started breaking down truss. A gull argued with the wind and lost. The four of them drifted toward the edge of the pier, where the bay turned light into moving metal. "You ever think about what an engine remembers?" Luis asked, to no one in particular. "Like, does it know who fixed it?" Ava rested her forearms on the rail. The water below shrugged and kept being water. "Engines don't remember," she said. "People do." Behind them, a couple of junior engineers from the HMX1 team hesitated, then approached. "Miss Morgan, could we ask about the pack cooling offset you suggested? We've been trying to model that." Ava stood easy as stepping into a familiar rhythm. "Yeah, bring your laptop. Let's walk it." They fell into step with her questions, small at first, then spilling like people who'd been waiting for permission. Elaine watched them go, a hand on her brother's arm. "You did the right thing," she said. He kept his eyes on Ava, on the team coalescing around her, not because a memo said so, but because competence has gravity. "No," he said. "We did the obvious thing. The right thing is to keep doing it when no one's watching." Elaine smiled. "You're learning," he huffed a laugh. Painfully. On the far side of the pier, the HMX1 sat cooling quietly, the new black of its brake discs fading like coals. It would go fast again tomorrow, and the day after, and one day it would be replaced by something faster still. That's the deal you make with the future. But some things don't get replaced. Sometimes a woman in a grease-stained shirt steps through a crowd and refuses to let a good thing fail. Sometimes a man used to being the loudest person in the room learns to make space for a better voice. Sometimes the strongest work doesn't announce itself. It just shows up. Listens hard, turns the right bolt, the right quarter turn, and changes the day. The bay threw thin light back at the city. The wind shifted. Somewhere, a torque wrench clicked home the small perfect sound of something now set to spec.